Good day, everybody. Welcome. This is the morning meeting. Sean, Dan, and I will run through the day, welcoming all questions here on the two-way platform. So if you're here, particularly if you've never raised your hand before, please join us in conversation like no other. If you're watching on X or YouTube, please feel free to watch passively. And if you are moved through the emanation of the presumption of grace and the spirit of peace, love, and understanding to comment in the chat, please do so. But do not put in anything that might resemble in any way what Dan would call smack. Thank you for joining us. I'll run through the day, and we have a lot of topics to discuss. Yesterday, we got a little bit of blown out by the presidential news conference. Many of you had a lot of thoughts about how to executive produce the show. I'd urge you to apply for the job if you'd like to do it, and you can help us make difficult judgments in a live broadcast. Thank you very much for your attention to this matter. The president played golf today. We'll show you a little bit of that in a moment. In fact, let's do that now. It's the president at the opening ceremony in Aberdeen, I believe, reminiscent of George Bush's famous "Watch me while I hit this drive."
Please welcome onto the tee the 45th and 47th President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump.
Thwack.
He's got a good swing for his age.
Yeah.
He does.
He likes the course, ladies and gentlemen. He likes the course a lot. Thank you very much. Have a good time. Thank you.
He's supposed to be on a plane at about 11 Eastern to fly back home and lands at the White House shortly after two-way tonight goes off the air. I'm hoping he lands early and gaggles for the last 15 minutes of my show. And just a few minutes ago, he posted his first public response to the tragic shooting in New York, which we'll talk about in a minute. Nothing newsworthy in there, just expresses support for New York and for the families who've lost loved ones. And again, we'll talk about that in a minute. Don't know what the vice president's doing today. Scott Bessent, day two in Stockholm for talks with the Chinese. President had a Truth Social post about that, which we'll look at in a moment. The talks may go into tomorrow, and there's still not been a readout from either side, as far as I've seen, as to what they're actually talking about or whether they're making good progress or not. The Americans may brief later today. Lee Zeldin is in Indianapolis announcing a new policy regarding global warming. House is out, Senate is in, doing a bunch of stuff, not of any huge significance. Noon, Dick Durbin, Raphael Warnock press conference on the reintroduction of the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And of course, it's Tuesday, which means both party senators are having their respective lunches. Consumer confidence and job opening reports due out at 10 o'clock hour. And the Fed meeting starts today, their announcement about what they'll do about rates tomorrow. All right, let's.
Hey, can I just real quick on this trip? So I don't want to belabor it, but I think the imagery coming out of this trip is something that I've never seen before. You have a president of the United States overseas with two leaders coming to him, not him going to them, to his property in not obviously the EU, not a member, or the UK, not a member country of the EU anymore. But the idea that the president of the EU comes to him, to his property in Turnberry, the UK prime minister comes to him, and then Starmer gets on Air Force One. I mean, this literally is just talk about reordering not just the global trading system, but diplomacy overseas. I know no one's going to talk about that, but it was fascinating to me to see the imagery of multiple world leaders coming to the home overseas of the U.S. president, and then one of them getting on Air Force One to travel with them.
No other president owns properties overseas and goes on vacations and golfs at their properties overseas. They're both first time.
I know, but I think it's not going to get noted if it's not now. So I just figured I'd say it before it gets thrown into the annals of history and never spoken of again.
Dan, do you judge the trip a success?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get to trade here, but because we still don't really know what it is. But absolutely. Look, to Sean's point, the Europeans came scrambling to him. And it does sound like the Europeans badly wanted a deal because I tweeted about some of this stuff, whether it was the German automakers frantic that they want to be able to sell cars here, or French luxury good makers talking about declining sales. The Europeans wanted the deal. The problem is, we don't really know what it is fully. I know everyone says, yes, we do, but no, we don't. And I thought it was fascinating that I forget who it was said that it's a new world order with trade, that we're never going back to the way it was prior, which is an interesting, and I think it's accurate, but that's a stark statement that Trump has bent the conversation in a new direction. And I think, domestically, we don't know what the Democrats' vision is for the future on this new playing field now.
Well, that's actually a great point that you're bringing up, Dan, because two things are important about trade and tariffs. Number one, how does any future president ever say, I'm not going to fight for a level playing field again after this? Number one. And number two, on tariffs, Biden saw this on China when he came into office after Trump. How do you take them off knowing how much revenue they bring in and how much of they sort of quasi get you back to reciprocal trade levels with other countries? So he truly has reset it. But this was the line of the day for me from the New York Times. Many businesses reacted to the agreement positively, though some Europeans were concerned about having conceded too much.
Yeah, that's the general tone of the overall coverage. Now, again, we can repeat it every episode. Depends on what the details are. But the Europeans are apologizing and explaining, and the president is triumphant. And American business is adapting. All right, the shooting. Have you guys both been in that building?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I will say this. I know. I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah.
But I know the NFL's there, so I think I might have walked in or something, but not of note.
So I've been in there many times, and for those of you who don't know the geography of Manhattan, it's near St. Patrick's Cathedral. It's near the Grand Central. It's near 30 Rock. It's near Trump Tower. It's right in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. And I was there recently, and the security was the norm for a building like that. Okay. There were guards. I couldn't, they didn't let me up until my escort came down. You get one of those white slips that you scan, and it opens the gate. But it's not, and it's much more secure than pre 9/11. But it obviously wasn't secure enough to stop this guy from entering the lobby and then going up in an elevator. Now, I don't know if he jumped over those things, but my first question to you guys is, do you think this is going to lead to, at least in Manhattan, a reevaluation and a reinforcement of a higher level of security? So, for instance, you can jump over those gates, right? Yeah. You go to like the Washington Bureau of MSNBC, NBC. You can jump over those gates if you got a gun. You just shoot your way through. So, do you think that I can't imagine the folks at Blackstone and the NFL aren't meeting today and saying, well, okay, now we're going to have to, put the level of security that's higher. So, Dan, do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, certainly in those Class A office buildings with very prominent tenants, I could see them extending that plexiglass to 10 feet tall or something, so that they almost like an airport when you go through security, and the doors open when you exit the airport to go to your bag.
That's what I'm envisioning. And I mean, if I'm a partner at Blackstone, Sean, I'm saying today, no, we have enough money. Let's spend $5 million and harden this place, because the guy just walked right in.
So the last time I was up in New York, and I'm not a frequent visitor to your city, but I love to walk it. I love people watching. I love just that city to me is like Vegas. In the sense that it's just great to watch people and interact. And I walk into a building, and the head of security happened to be there. He knew who I was, and he said, "How did you get here?" And I said, "What do you mean?" I walked. And he goes, "Seriously?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "We don't allow any of our top people to walk. We escort them to their car and all this." And I said, "Well, I love," and he kind of looked at me and he said, "To be honest, the next time you come, give me a call. Here's my number." And I was taken back. I literally was like, you got to be kidding me. I love walking around New York. And he's like, with your profile, he's like, no way I'd walk, and I'm not trying to scare you. Then when I saw this yesterday, to your point about the protocols going into a building, I think if you are a high profile individual like the United CEO saw several months ago now, and the incident that occurred now. So if you're a high-profile individual or a high-profile institution, whether it's Blackstone, BlackRock, the NFL, NBC, somewhere where somebody want to come make a statement or have a grievance, I think individuals and institutions are both going to want to rethink things now. So
I've been in many of the top buildings with prominent clients in New York over the last 5 years, and they're all the same. I've been in one with a higher level of security, and I bet you someone's going to upgrade now, maybe even that building, and then there's going to be an arms race to see who's got the best security. But I mean, it's no surprise to me that the guy could walk in because it's just not very secure. On the other hand, it's a pain in the ass, right? It's going to make it getting in and out of, even if you're a tenant, more. Okay, Mr. Mamdani remains in Uganda for his wedding celebration inside this compound. The New York Post is covering it quite a bit. He chose not to come back yesterday in the midst of the mayor's race. He did post this on X 107, please. I'm heartbroken to learn of the horrific shooting in Midtown, and I'm holding the victims, their families, and the NYPD officer in critical condition in my thoughts. Grateful for all of our first responders on the ground. It's common in my business to say, oh, it's too soon to talk politics. No, I talk politics the first minute because the politicians are thinking about politics the first minute. Dan, would you expect that this incident will have an impact on the mayor's race?
Yes, it will, because anytime you have a tragedy like this, it sharpens the mind about public safety. It might give you pause for somebody who is relatively inexperienced, who's had some views of the New York City Police Department, of the role they play in public safety that are different. I mean, to me, I find them abhorrent, but I get it. Some people may agree with him. And so I think I'll be curious how Adams and Cuomo, obviously Adams is a sitting mayor. This is like in his wheelhouse now to be a leader.
And he's been front and center.
Front and center, as you would expect the sitting mayor to be. How does Andrew Cuomo deal with this? And if I were Mamdani, I would get on a plane immediately and come back. I think it's a terrible look that you're out there and you put out just a tweet. I mean, the politics is optics. I would not be out of sight right now.
Yeah, and just to be clear, New York City mayors have no greater responsibility than to be on top of stuff like this. And so he's not rising to the occasion. Maybe he thinks it doesn't matter. Sean, does it matter?
Well, and Mark, I mean, to that point, where mayors who have not been present during snowstorms, during floods, like the history in this city of mayors who just put a statement out and don't leave where they are is pretty long, and they've paid prices for it every time.
Sean, do you think this impacts the mayor's race? If so, how?
So I do. I think it impacts it for the reasons that Dan suggested. I mean, how do you not talk about public safety, hardening institutions and buildings, both public and private resources that the city will offer? But also, again, to Dan's point, your position on public safety and policing is questionable. You tell me how somebody, yesterday came to respond to that without a gun would have handled it. I'd love to hear that one. And so the idea that Mamdani has continued to talk about sending social workers out to certain situations is definitely going to be a problem. I will tell you, I'm a little conflicted on the political response. I think you guys know my position on what I think of this individual, but I do give him a bit of a break when you're not mayor. The idea of rushing back of an incident. I mean, I get the optics, and although if I were him, I'm not sure that why do you? I don't know. I get. It may not be a tweet, but you need to do more or something. But you're powerless. The event is over. I'm not sure that maybe getting back sooner is better, but I don't know that I fully am on board with, if I were his campaign manager and he called and said, do I need to get on a private plane right now and land in 20 hours? I'd say, when are you getting back? Let's maybe get back sooner rather than later. But I'm not sure getting back on the next flight is of the utmost.
One thing to focus on, heightened from even before, is who's this police commissioner going to be, and is he going to give people an indication of that before the election? He's going to have to have a strong police commissioner if he wins. And there've been talk of him keeping the incumbent, who's also been front and center since the shooting. Ms. Tish, and I don't believe she will be his police commissioner. I'll say that.
Hmm.
Okay. Putin. Yesterday, the president, in response to a question, said he was shortening the window he was giving Putin to come to the peace table and to stop pounding Ukraine. I'm amazed at how little coverage it got. I understand maybe the press thinks the president's deadlines are meaningless, so it doesn't necessarily have any significance. But Sean, do you think the president will stick to this deadline, and what does this deadline mean?
Well, to your first point, it's funny, for as much as people said he wasn't going to be tough on Putin, he moves up the deadline and would be seemingly taking a harder approach, not just in terms of the deadline, but the comments that he made about Putin and the conclusion that he's come to on his willingness to get a deal. And yet, where was I mean, it's like, this is everything the press said he wasn't going to do, and he did it, and now it's crickets. I think that there's clearly a willingness. Look, I think with Trump, everything is a negotiation, and that was a tactic to get Putin to get to the table sooner rather than later and recognize that he wasn't kidding. So I think that, he is up the ante with Putin, and we'll see. But I actually feel like there's a greater chance that he does, whether it's, the secondary sanctions, et cetera. But I think that there's going to be either a ratcheting up of the rhetoric or the actions sooner rather than later.
Dan, did the president's tone yesterday convince you that John's position is at least possibly right, or are you still skeptical that he'll ever get tough on Putin?
I'm still skeptical. I think I don't view sanctions as serious in any way, shape, or form, because they don't deal with us. They don't make a lot of money off of us or Europe, or there's some in Europe they do. It's the Chinese. The Chinese are their bankers. The Chinese are their arms suppliers. Chinese are buying their oil. So, sanctions to me are just kind of a half-hearted measure.
Well, but to your point, Dan, it's even worse than that, because you're meeting with them in Sweden to try to get meeting with the Chinese in Sweden, yeah. And then where you can hit them, because you're right, we're down to about, I think it's 5 billion from 45 billion of total trade, even on the periphery of
Yeah.
But if you go to secondary and you hit the Chinese for oil at the same time you're in Sweden saying let's get a deal, you're undermining the same thing that your other team is off trying to get. So you've created a conundrum even on secondary tariffs that is going to make the diplomacy efforts that you're doing with your Treasury Secretary even more challenging. So I think they put themselves in a bit of a pickle, but I do think he's going to find some way of ratcheting this up.
I mean, look, I come back to the only way to really ratchet it up, and the only way, Mark, that I think the press sat up was when he started talking about more arms again to Ukraine. Yeah. And I think if Trump said, I'm talking to the EU now because the EU just agreed to buy U.S. weaponry, which I think is somewhat related to this conversation.
Yes, sir.
The European countries have agreed to buy $100 billion worth of arms that's going to go to Ukraine. Now, if you're Putin, you sit up and say, I'm looking at years more, and I can't win this. If America arms the Ukrainians, who seem to be willing to die until the last person's dead in the country, will fight you, then you say, how do we win this? We can't. Right. So do we take the deal as it is now?
Right. Howard Lutnick was on CNBC just a moment ago. We have a clip. I don't think it's on Russia, but let's listen to Howard Lutnick, please.
Horse trading still to do, but the fundamentals of their $20 trillion economy are set. We sell into them without a tariff. They sell into us for 15%, but they protect themselves on autos. They protect themselves on pharma. They protect themselves on semiconductors. And those three protections were fundamental for the European Commission. And anybody who picks on them is going to learn over the next 2 weeks why the people who did that deal were really smart to get this deal done with Donald Trump.
All right, so that's on Europe. Okay, three more topics, then your questions. So please, if you want in on the conversation, raise your hand. And again, we'd love for some new folks who haven't been part of the conversation before to join. We've talked about Tulsi Gabbard and the presidents and their accusations against the Obama administration. And our community has lots of views about this, ranging from the president, Obama should be in prison, to this is all a hoax. And I'll just tell you guys, based on the reading and reporting that I've done and listening that I've done in the last couple of days, here's my view. They've overstated the case in terms of particularly President Obama and the notion of treason. But I do believe that some of the key actors involved in this have a history of doing things against Donald Trump that warrant us to consider that they may have done something improper and maybe even something illegal. I'm not sure what that is yet, but I do believe that there's a lot of unanswered questions that do need to be answered, and I wish they could be answered, not necessarily in the context of accusations of treason and not necessarily in the context of a criminal investigation. But I do believe that there are some unanswered questions regarding the decisions that were made, which clearly led, whether there was the intent or not, which clearly led to an extraordinary burden on President Trump as he began his presidency, facing accusations that proved not to be true. Sean, where are you on that story?
Well, CIA Director Radcliffe is apparently going to continue to release more underlying documents, declassify stuff. The bottom line is when you actually look at the progression of what was known and when and what actions were taken, I'm with you to some degree that I'm not going to use words like treason until I see it play out a little bit more. I think that's a very, very heavy charge. But I do think that knowing what we know now from the underlying intelligence reports, what was chosen to be used and what wasn't, and it goes back to, looking at the Steele dossier in itself and who paid for it, what its motives were, and how it continued to play through as a source document. You have to question why the FBI and the CIA did certain things. At the very least, there is no one who can look at this and say, this should not have gotten treated the way that it did, especially when you go back and start to look at after the election on that December 6th meeting with Obama and what they chose to focus on and not focus on. There is no question, having been there, never mind the Mueller report, that there was no collusion with Russia. But when you look at the actions of Russia and what they had on Hillary Clinton and say, if they knew all this stuff and they really
allegedly.
No, they did know that she had, or at least there were allegations that they were willing to put out about her pharmaceutical and drug use. Whether they were true or not, we know that they had that information. Again, whether it's true or not, but
maybe we don't
know.
No,
that we know that they right.
We know the U.S. government asserts that they had it.
Okay, so you're going to believe them that they had that, but then you're not going to. I mean, you have to pick which side. I mean, at some point, I go, so we know that Russia had it. We know it didn't come out. So if you actually believe that Russia wanted Donald Trump to win, then why wasn't that ever put out? I mean, again, something doesn't add up. That's unequivocal. I think there's whether or not you're the biggest Trump hater or Clinton lover, you can admit that there's a lot on that table that says this doesn't add up. Yeah, and it really is interesting, especially when if you buy into the idea that Russia wanted Trump to win, then you also have to believe that the other point that they maintain this evidence or these allegations and never weaponize them in a way that would have favored the candidate that supposedly they wanted to win. At the very least, that should be something that everybody should be able to agree to.
Well, I can think of a million reasons why they wouldn't put out everything they had on Hillary Clinton. But Dan, the Steele dossier is dirty. Anything that the Steele dossier touched has to be suspect. Brennan's hostility to Trump also has to be a given. You have to assume. And then the willingness of the people in the Biden and Clinton orbit to use intelligence and leaking and purported intelligence to hurt Donald Trump is a given. Do you accept all those things? Steele dossier is dirty, Brennan is hostile, and people in the national security and foreign policy establishment were willing to leak to the media in order to hurt Trump. Do you agree with all that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do, but the one thing that I think hindsight is 20/20 on is we now know there was no indisputable proof of collusion. We know all of this because of the investigation. At the time, we did not know, right? I go back to, you're right, Sean, were the Russians involved to help Trump win, or were they involved to help damage Hillary, right? There is a difference. And because they knew that there had been contact between the campaign and the Russians, they didn't know if there was collusion. So again, now we know Bob Mueller, who I keep saying I respect his findings, but to me, there's always been this effort, even before we knew that verdict, by the right to try to just sabotage this so that it could not be.
Okay,
And,
so
and that to me, and look, I get it, all's fair in politics, but to now like cherry pick things, again, they're never going to stop, I think, until they destroy it.
So I believe it's October. I'd have to go back and look at the dates and the notes. Myself and probably 3 other RNC officials were summoned to DHS headquarters on Nebraska Avenue, brought into a briefing where senior officials at DHS said to us, we want to show you and prove to you that our election system is basically impenetrable. We are a disparate system of voting mechanisms. So Akron, Ohio versus Little Rock, Arkansas, like you could never influence an election. Yeah. And they wanted to convince us to say, hey, look, here's the deal. We believe the subcontext was the following. We believe that Donald Trump's going to lose. We want you as senior RNC officials to come out and say that this couldn't have been hacked, that this was all made up. And we want you guys to be able to attest to that. We're willing to show you any of the underlying information, et cetera, that proves that the integrity of our system is strong. It cannot be hacked. So that was the predicate that they were laying out in the lead up to the election. And then suddenly it changes afterwards that there's collusion. They knew it was false. They knew it was a lie. But once Trump won, they immediately shifted courses and said collusion. So how do you have...
Sean, you just said 2 different issues. Hacking election systems and collusion are 2 different
Fair
issues.
enough. But go back to what the media and your party claimed, which is the election was hacked and he was illegitimate. So you guys use that as the predicate to go after collusion, because you had to set the predicate, which is that there was collusion and that there was all of this desire of Russia to want campaign, because that's then how you get to collusion, because you can't have collusion.
There was, again, the mainstream argument was not that voting systems were hacked.
Yes, it was.
It wasn't.
It was. I literally have an entire minute of media from CNN to CBS.
There are people who said that. Yeah. Just the way there were people on the right who said the Italian military hacked in 2020, which was perhaps the most absurd thing I've ever heard.
Okay, fair enough. Hold on. Wait. Fair enough. Wait. If your argument is that the claims after 2020 about whether it's Italian or Venezuelan voting machines is nuts, right? Which is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but then how can you sit back and say, how come no one said when CBS, CNN, the Washington Post, NBC all used the word hacking repeatedly after 2016 and no one said a damn thing? I don't want to hear it.
You can cherry pick and find examples of them irresponsibly speculating about it, but that, as Dan said, was not the main argument. We'll move on, but we'll come back to this. Quickly on Gaza. It seems to me Bibi is going to have to back down after yesterday and allow at least more aid in a shorter term basis. I find it overblown when people say this is ripping MAGA apart or that it's some huge watershed moment between Trump and Bibi. I just think both those are overstated. You guys agree with me that both those are overstated?
100%.
Okay, let's
so you're saying Politico is wrong?
Exactly. Exactly. One more thing.
By the way, just as a side note, since it got brought up yesterday, as I said on the show, having been in the room with Trump multiple times, like when imagery is shown, and then Politico comes out today in their playbook and talks about how imagery of children and women influences Trump. And I'm like, God, it's amazing how they seem to be one day behind all of the insights.
Yes, but also they wrote about it in a completely cynical way.
Right.
Which is again doing a disservice to their readers, because Donald Trump is not cynical about this.
But Mark, I will say this though on that note. I have a ton of Jewish friends. The Jewish community is still pretty adamant this is fake news, that this is not a real issue. Yeah, and that gives Bibi, I think, to not back down.
I agree. And obviously there's still resentment in Israel that, like, where was all this, upset over October 7th, et cetera.
Right.
Lastly, Epstein. I continue to believe that the missing piece here, or a missing piece, is the entire run of the president's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. How did they meet? Why did they fly around together? How did they spend time together? I continue to believe that is important to understanding this story, particularly because the president, despite his occasional denials, continues to run this question of how this is going to be treated by the federal government at this point. Yesterday, again, another story I can't believe did not get more attention. The president completely changed the explanation that had been given on his behalf many times by government officials and others of why he and Epstein ended their friendship. It's been cited that they had a conflict over a real estate deal. It's been cited in the past that Trump thought he was a creep for Epstein was a creep for some conduct towards either the daughter of a member of Mar-a-Lago or an employee of Mar-a-Lago. Yesterday, in that extended session with the prime minister, the president offered up an entirely new explanation that I don't believe anyone, including the president himself, has ever offered up. The New York Times account goes thusly. This would be 104A. He also said yesterday that I don't know that he'd said this before either, that he was invited to the island but chose not to go. Now, or one of the islands, there were two. Now, here's the new part. In his appearance on Monday, Mr. Trump also contradicted a previous explanation for the eventual rupture in their relationship offered by the White House. Aides had said that Mr. Trump barred Mr. Epstein from his Mar-a-Lago club, quote, for being a creep. On Monday, Mr. Trump said Mr. Epstein was blacklisted because he had hired away some of Mr. Trump's employees. For years, quote, for years, I wouldn't talk to Jeffrey Epstein, Trump said. I would talk because he did something that was inappropriate. He hired help, and I said, don't ever do that again. He stole people that worked for me. I said, don't ever do that again. He did it again. And I threw him out of the place, persona non grata. I threw him out, and that was it. It was unclear what employees Mr. Trump was referring to, and the White House did not immediately offer an explanation. Okay, Sean, what is up with this? Like, this is not a small matter in the scheme of things. Why is the president offering up a new explanation? And if this is the right explanation, why would the previous explanation given out that was simply wrong and left unattended to?
So correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it true that one of the employees that allegedly was hired away was used in some inappropriate way?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Virginia. Yes.
Guthrie. Or so.
Yes.
I guess my question is, why isn't that consistent? Which is, if you hire someone away from my employ and then treat them horribly and do allegedly bad things to them, isn't that being a creep?
It could be, but the characterizations in the past, never corrected, were not about hiring people away. It was about improper conduct.
Right. But my point is, and I'm not trying to be like just reflexively, but I'm saying that, like, my understanding is that one of these employees was hired away and treated, very inappropriately.
But that's
therefore,
but that's not what the president said yesterday. The president made it sound like this just had to do with the annoying practice of someone hiring away employees.
I get that. And so all I'm trying to say is, if that's the case, if it's just that you hired my people and I'm pissed that you hired my people after I told you not to, then that is vastly different. But if it's the same person who is allegedly treated inappropriately, then it's just an expansion of that example.
Understood, that could be the case, but it's not clear or clarified. Dan, do you think this is a significant change in any way, or no?
Yeah, I think it's significant because it just keeps the story kind of alive. Maybe not in the mainstream media, but in all the people that care about this. That he just, again, Trump is such an outstanding political athlete. He has such a good sense of people, pop culture, everything. On this one issue, time and again, he's off. His stories change. He's very trying to get it to go away. He's throwing out shiny red balls. Human nature says, why? Why is he so off on this story?
And it seems clear, and I'm not the first person to make this point, that he's setting the table when something comes out in the documents that he doesn't like, to say it was inserted there by Joe Biden on a Selectric typewriter. Like he's saying the documents were tampered with. He said it again. And again, there's just no reason to make that accusation unless he's setting something up, I believe. All right, let's go to your questions. Again, as always, I'll bring you in, unmute yourself. Tell us where you are and what's on your mind for Sean and Dan. And we'll start with Judy. Judy, welcome in. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Mark, Dan, and Sean. I'm so happy to be here. Mark, I just wanted to show you that I have actually been a fan of yours for a very long time. Can you look at that?
Mar-a-Lago?
Where's that from, Judy?
Well, that was back in November of 2022. I flew from Houston, where I'm from, to New York City to attend the Commentary annual dinner. And that year it was a roast of Barry Weiss.
Yeah, a great event. I love that event.
I saw you at the cocktail hour and went up and introduced myself and had this picture taken with you. I'm so proud of that.
Awesome.
What was very interesting is you started interviewing me. When you found out I was from Texas, you wanted to know what was my opinion of Ted Cruz. and I gave you my opinion. But what interested me is that you are so curious, and that's why you are doing what you're doing today, because you love to find out what other people are thinking. So that was a prime example.
Thank you for that, Judy, and good to see you.
That's awesome, Judy. Nice job.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know that I have so much of a question as a statement or some thoughts, and that is yesterday, Mark, I know you took a lot of flack for taking the news conference of Trump in Scotland. And when I watched you again last night, you were referring to people that were giving you flack. And I just want to say, I thought that was the greatest thing. And here's why. Why would you come on here and analyze the news when you can actually show the news? And the little anecdote I'll give about that is that I am by nature I have a conservative worldview. Okay. So that typically is translated to Republican. Back in 2016, I could not take Trump. I was what you would say a never Trumper. I voted that year for Evan McMullen. I don't know. He's long gone. That was a very stupid act on my part. In 2020, after COVID, I didn't think that was handled well. Biden came along. He presented himself as somebody who was going to, for 4 years, 1 year, one term, going to settle things down. So I voted for Biden. So then 2024 is coming up, and I thought rather than listening to what the pundits are telling me about him, I'm going to start listening to him. So I sat down one Saturday afternoon to watch one of his rallies. Well, lo and behold, that happened to be the Butler rally. And I saw what happened there, of course, live on TV. But anyway, after that, I just started listening to him, and I saw a whole different version of him. I actually now am very much in favor of him. I voted for him. I think he's doing some great things. Do I like everything he's doing? No. Does sometimes he make me cringe? Yes. But overall, I am very, very happy with the direction he's taking this country in. And I just would say it's a lesson to me. Go to the source.
Judy, thank you for all that. And I won't belabor yesterday, but all I'll say is we didn't anticipate the president spending an hour with the prime minister taking questions, number one. And number two, I think in the future, we'll do a little bit more live analysis during the event than we did. I think that offers a way for us to offer unique coverage. But I'll just say to folks, I made a joke about it earlier, producing live stuff is tricky, right? You don't know what's going to happen. And I thought if we cut away, we might miss the news. And as you said, it's silly for us to sit around and analyze things when Sean made the same point when the news is happening right then. Sean, comment on what Judy said or question for Judy, please.
You know, Judy, it's interesting. As a guy who was a spokesperson for a long, long time, I appreciate your comments because there were times when you'd say, well, you can actually hear from the president himself. Why hear from a spokesman? And you know, I always found that fascinating. I would always rather see the source document or hear directly from the individual than hear someone else's analysis. And so I appreciate your comments because I agree with you 100%.
Dan.
I think you guys have all said it very well. And I think, Judy, it's fascinating your evolution and how you got there with Donald Trump and your views of him today. That's interesting that you're still net.
You know, Judy, I had a professor on Martinez several weeks ago, and I was talking about how excited I was for this conversation. He wrote a book. It's called The Media and the Apprentice. And he's a Bernie Sanders supporter that wrote this analysis of Trump's media interactions and said, here was what the narrative was about what he said, you know, very fine people on both sides, Mexican, blah, blah, blah. And he went through and analyzed it and said, look, I don't like the guy. I don't like his policies. I didn't vote for him. I'm a Sanders guy. But like, here is the full context of actually what was said in each circumstance. And that goes to your point is that too often you've got a filter, which is the left-wing legacy media that's telling you what someone said. And so many times I'll say the same thing to folks, which is go look at the document or listen to the exact clip of what was said. And you get a totally different answer when that happens because
let me just say that just a few minutes ago, you all threw up on the screen something that Donald Trump supposedly said, which he did say, but it was out of context. And that was, I didn't have the privilege of going to Jeffrey Epstein's island. And I didn't see the original, but what I read is that he was saying that facetiously.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he was. I don't think anybody.
You see, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
If I were
Yeah.
ignorant, didn't pay attention to
Yeah.
things, I would say that now. Well, that doesn't sound very good.
Yeah. I think
Right there on your show
yeah.
is an example to me.
Yeah, although I think I didn't mention it was sarcastic because I think it's pretty obvious that it was. But you're right. Maybe should have made it clear. Judy, thank you. I hope to see you at the commentary dinner in the fall. If John Padorit's, maybe he'll comp us.
Yeah, I hope to go again.
That thing's expensive. Thank you, Judy. Grateful to you and great to see you. Adam Smith, welcome in. Explain monetary policy or whatever you'd like.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Tell everybody where you are. And
yeah, I actually know very little about that. So
okay.
I did want to jump in real quick, just going back to the Tulsi Gabbard drop, because I think there's a little bit of downplaying about some of the messaging. So I'm reading some notes here because I had to get my dates right. But in a speech in London at South Bank in October of 2017, so a year after the election, Hillary Clinton speaking to the group, which was public and then obviously put out on the interweb, we know that they were into voting rolls. So she's basically implying that they got into voting machines and impacted, votes. And the reason that's important is because one of the pieces of information from Gabbard showed that on December 8th of 2016, which was supposed to be the original PDB, was quoted, Russian and criminal actors did not impact recent U.S. election results by conducting malicious cyber activities against election infrastructure. So if that had gone out as the original PDB, people would have known, and there were people on the left, including the presidential candidate, who was saying that they were into voting rolls, which was obviously not true. And the reason that's important, too, is there was a poll on YouGov in March of 2018 that showed that 66% of Democrats answered yes to the question, Russia tampered with vote tallies in order to get Donald Trump elected president.
Right.
So if you're going to get 66% of Democrats, and I didn't vote for Trump, so I really didn't have anyone in the game. I've been a third-party voter for a while. I live in California, so my vote really doesn't have a huge impact unless I can convince 3 million people to vote differently. But to get 66% of Democrats to say that Russia actually was able to change vote tallies means there had to have been some kind of messaging out there to convince people that there was more than just, some kind of influence.
Right. So, Adam, you're raising a bunch of issues. We could spend 2 hours on this, and we won't. But you're raising a bunch of issues. I'll say 3 things and then turn it to my colleagues. First of all, Hillary Clinton, when speaking about things she thinks Donald Trump did to harm her, does not always speak precisely. How's that? So, I mean, I'm not sure I'd take her as like the source on this, number one. Number two, we all have to deal, and this goes to what I was talking to Sean about this earlier, like just because a government official tells you what some intelligence says doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean they're accurately telling you what the intelligence shows, and it doesn't mean the intelligence is right. And whatever you think about the motives of the Obama administration in 2016, they were grappling with the reality that they were hearing different things about what Russia was doing, and they didn't know which were true or not. Intelligence is not a black and white thing often, and they were also grappling with the question of whether they should warn the public and local election officials of what they were hearing Russia might try to do. So even if you think the darkest thing about their motives, there's no doubt in my mind from the reporting I've done on this that they were really worried about not only what Russia was trying to do and doing, but how to convey to the campaigns and the public and local election officials what they were hearing, because they didn't want to err on either side. And finally, I think it's pretty clear that Russia thought about or tried to tamper, based on what we've been told. Doesn't mean it's true, but I think the people in the U.S. government thought that was true. So just because it didn't affect the outcome and just because there's no indication they were successful doesn't mean they didn't try. And if Russia or North Korea or Iran or China is trying to interfere with machines, even if they don't, it's obviously a super serious problem for all the obvious reasons. So I hear what you're saying, and I'm not minimizing it, but I'm trying to put it in the context of what I believe actually happened. And again, I never believe when a government official says, or the New York Times says, a government official says, Putin likes ponies. I say, well, maybe he does and maybe he doesn't. But you can't rely on a government official. And what's insidious is there some people, I think Brennan and Clapper would be in this category, who leak stuff out to the New York Times and the Washington Post with a political agenda. Doesn't mean what they were leaking wasn't true. It doesn't mean it's true or not, but they use their allies in the media to do that, and they're not the only ones associated with Barack Obama, Joe Biden, and Hillary Clinton who've done that. Dan.
Yeah, I think really well said, Mark. I think Barack Obama went to the podium and made exceptionally clear that he did not believe that the systems had been hacked, that the integrity of our election had been compromised. So that is the leader of the free world, the head of our party at the time, being very clear, right? And I think to Mark's point about Hillary Clinton, he said it really well. I think, look, Adam, just like you look at our party and say, how at the time did 60% believe that the Russians hacked the system? We say, how did 60% think that 2020 was stolen? And how did 60% think the Capitol was, a peace, love, and understanding party on January 6th? So unfortunately, conspiracy theories and people consuming information and believing what they want to believe runs rampant in our politics these days. It's maddening.
Sean.
I agree with some of this. I do think that there are certain facts that we do know. We do know that the Steele dossier was bought and paid for by Democratic operatives in the DNC. We do know that
and by a Republican donor.
And we do know that that was used as the basis of Crossfire Hurricane. They opened up a case, an investigation based on that data. They didn't filter it, knowing where the source of it was. We do know, as I said, that they were briefing myself and others about the integrity of the elections. Dan, to your point, Barack Obama might have come out, but then did nothing to further that point, right? So they used all of what they knew, and then after Donald Trump won, had to create a narrative, and they allowed it to be perpetuated and did nothing to stop it. In fact, having the information, whether or not, I will concede, because I don't think it actually is indisputable that Russia has tried to influence the United States in multiple ways, as we have done, as the North Koreans have done, as the Iranians have done. I think that's pretty open source material. That being said, they allowed things to be perpetuated in terms of what they were trying to accomplish and what methods that they had used. And no one on the left or in the media in particular stood up and said that that's not true. So I do get a kick out of, Dan, you have a...
It's not true that, look, we're going to...
Well, no. He read you Hillary Clinton's comments, right? Hillary Clinton went out there and made false accusations about what happened in the election, and no one in the media attacked her for spreading false information, for lying, right? When she says it, it's like, forget that happened. Like, we're going to tree in a forest. Didn't happen. And yet you guys are all about, CNN's on their high horse talking about misinformation, and an apple is an apple and a banana is a banana, running an entire marketing campaign about this, and yet ignore information, perpetuate the lies about 51 intelligence officials and Hunter Biden's laptop. It always flows in one direction. It always flows in one direction.
We're going to disagree on that.
Adam, if you could make anybody president, who would you make president? They have to be constitutionally eligible.
Oh, yeah, I have no idea right now.
No idea.
No.
I'm saying I'm 35, born in the U.S.
How will Kamala Harris fare if she runs for governor of California?
Ooh. I don't know that she'll fare that well. When leading up to this presidential election, I came across some polling that obviously we know how she did in 2019 in the primary. She wasn't very well supported by Californians in that primary. And then there was a poll that I came across, I don't have it referenced, but I think it was 2023 that showed that, again, only like half of the state would want to see her at the top of the ticket. That was a full year before the swap. Yeah. So I'm not sure she's, even
if Gavin Newsom runs for president, how do you think he'll do?
I think he's a great politician. I think he's a horrible leader. I think his track record in California is well positioned to be exploited. The numbers in California are pretty horrible. And that's one of the reasons why one of the main stats you hear him talk about is we're the fourth biggest economy in the world, because you can't talk about homelessness, can't talk much about education. You can go down the list. There's all kinds of issues in California, and a lot of them have only been worsened over the last 6 years or so. So I think he's a great politician, but I think what he's done to the state would really hold him back in general.
All right, and lastly, what do you think of Sydney Sweeney's jeans?
I think she's got good genes.
Good answer.
Good answer. Thank
And
you,
I
sir.
only know that, Mark, because I watched you last night. I
Yeah.
actually didn't know about it until I got to it tonight.
Yeah, it's a crazy story.
Got to read the New York Post every day.
Yeah. Adam, thank you. Grateful to you. Appreciate it. All right. Rex, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind.
I'm going to go back to, I'm in Colorado. I'm going to go back to the Clinton phrase. It depends on what the meaning of creep is. You can be a creep by taking somebody's employees. And
You can, Rex, I'll interrupt you. You can, but that's not what his spokespeople meant.
Well, I saw it, and I mean, when he says he was a creep, that's a broad term.
It is, but that's not what that's not the clear impression his spokespeople tended to leave.
Okay.
They didn't want to leave. They didn't try to leave the impression it was over an employment dispute.
And then one other question I have, going back to the 2016 election, was there a DNC staffer who ended up murdered?
Yes.
And he had some connection with knowing if the servers had been hacked or not hacked by Russia? Is there any?
Yes, he was an IT staffer. I can't remember his name, but yes, he was killed. I believe it was the NOMA, which is Northern Massachusetts Ave near Union Station area of DC. Seth Rich, and there was an investigation. His family's been through hell. I will say that there was a narrative forever about, but yes, and I don't believe that there's ever been anything that would tie this back to.
Did they ever find out who killed him?
I don't believe they did. Nor have they
I
ever
believe
found
it's
out,
unsolved.
Nor have they ever found out who placed the pipe bombs outside the RNC and the DNC.
There you go.
These remain unsolved and the subject of an enormous amount of speculation. And on this program, we try to stay with facts. Rex, grateful to you. Thank you for that. Have a great day. I consider Dan's promiscuous use of X to be creepy. Just kidding. I'm so welcome in. Thank you for coming back. Tell folks who don't know where you are in Malaysia and what's on your mind.
Thanks, Mark. I'm in Kuala Lumpur. I have two quick questions.
Yes, sir.
I think Russiagate is legit. Matt Taibbi, in my opinion, has been a consistent and reliable investigative journalist still around. Mainstream media, I think, is trying very hard to ignore and bury this story the way they did and collude to hide the Biden mental issues. I see the same pattern, Mark. There's no curiosity to investigate. It's just building denials. Just watch Meet the Press over the weekend. To me, this is worse than Watergate. The Steele dossier, to me, is the uranium cake of WMD evidence paid by the Hillary campaign. Campaign that labeled Tulsi as a Russian asset. Same dossier that claimed Trump is subject to Russian blackmail for alleged video of him in Moscow. I'm not a conspiracist, but I see Blair Underwood Clinton fingerprints all over the place.
Yes, sir.
Brennan manufactured the ICA report to allege collusion and Putin manipulation for Trump win in 2016. I remember 2 years of congressional and impeachment hearings and media drumming Trump as a Manchurian candidate. I think there is a cause for conspiracy to impeach and remove him via the 25th Amendment, using illegally manufactured ICA fabricated evidence and a leak of that evidence to Washington Post. This could be a felony. What do you guys think about my thoughts that a special counsel is probably the best way to proceed? And Mark, do you see the same media cover up in this instance?
I think you've about 75% well stated it, and you've used restraint and clarity. And I think what the outline that you gave should be investigated. I'm not a big fan of special counsels, but in this case, it might be necessary. But then you've got the question of who it is and who appoints them. So I'm not sure the best way for this to proceed. But I do think whoever's proceeding, whether it's the media or the Trump administration or Congress, should do it with the kind of level-headed restraint and sticking to facts that you did and laying things out. Sean.
I'm a fan of more transparency. I think one thing that scares me, and this is kind of like my tangential, I know this is going to seem like a weird turn, but it's like a Maha thing, right? And the reason I bring this up is for years, I was the kind of person that said, if the FDA says you take 3 servings of orange juice in the morning, I was like, then that's what you should take. That's healthy. And you start realizing all of the conflicts that have gone on and some of the things like you look at red dye and go, why did we suddenly ban it if you guys claimed it was healthy, and yet one day in November you wake up and say it's not? It's because you knew. And I look at a lot of this intelligence stuff, and knowing how it's been weaponized is troubling, and it should trouble everybody. And I want more transparency on this because, again, here's the when you look at what happened the last few years, 51 intelligence agency or so-called experts come out and claim that something is the case, and literally they censor a story, they ban it, they refuse to talk about it because so-called experts say so. And yet here is the director of national intelligence making pretty serious allegations. Whether you agree or not, where is the same level of curiosity among all those same reporters? The same reporters, by the way, who covered up Joe Biden's mental and physical decline. I mean, there is, as I said to Dan, there is a continued pattern, and it always happens in one direction. And so I'm grateful for people like Michael Taibbi or Michael Schellenberger. There are people out there that are willing to do the work and to expose it. And I think the more that whether it's John Radcliffe or Tulsi Gabbard can release the source documents, this gets back to our earlier point that we're making, it's good for the country.
Sean, I know you need to go. You want to tell us quickly what you have tonight, or you need to just jump?
It's going to be interesting. Daniel Turner, we're going to talk a lot about energy, the impact of what this means, the trade deals mean. Lee Zeldin's doing a big event today, blah, blah, blah. And then our Link Lauren, who is out there crushing it, both in the White House and got a great new podcast on. He's going to talk to us a lot about the youth vote and what's happening, some really interesting topics. So appreciate it.
Great, John. We'll see you tomorrow. Dan, I'm just going to urge you, because I know what your posture's been on this story up until now.
I want to stay now.
I'm just going to urge you to listen to Tom Scholl's framing and recognize that there are some unanswered questions, and just ask for your support and fact-based understanding of what actually happened.
Sure.
You
know what I'll just say? So I obviously disagree with 90% of what you said. I will stand by my belief that the right is just trying to destroy this because Trump can't stand what happened in terms of the Russians ended up helping him. He didn't ask for it. I think it's a dangerous precedent that's being set, that every single time somebody doesn't like a piece of information, you investigate the investigators to try to destroy them.
Okay. The answer to your question is yes. The media is not interested in covering this for the same reasons they typically make coverage decisions, is they don't want to help Donald Trump. But I believe that truly, if an organization like the Washington Post or the New York Times decided to make a stand here and cover it fairly, rather than the way they're covering it now, which is the way they covered the Biden thing, just play defense for the Democrats, concede only what absolutely has to be conceded. And again, I'll say, people like Adam Schiff and John Brennan have never been held accountable for what they did by the press. They've just never been held accountable. And until that happens, it's hard to have the credibility to say that they're passing fair judgment on the set of facts that are still in some ways murky.
I just think, Mark, the challenge with all of this is to say you're taking politics out of everything. You'd have to apply the same standard to the Trump team in the first term, in the second term, and in the history of the Republic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's what we should do. Okay. Thank you for your question. Dan, you got anything going on later we should know about?
No. Just
okay.
Peace, love, and understanding.
All right. Tonight at 6 Eastern time, we'll have full coverage of the president's flight home from Scotland and everything else that happens today. Amongst my guests will be Steve Elmendorf, the Democratic strategist, one of our favorite guests ever. Michael Moynihan Report, joined by Sam Tenenhouse, author of the new William F. Buckley biography. That's at 7 Eastern, so back-to-back shows. And then later today, a new episode of Next Up will drop, and my guests will include Michael Smerconish, and he and I are going to talk about the media and about Trump and about all sorts of things. And I've been on Michael's show many times, every Wednesday for several years now, but I don't believe I've ever interviewed him before, so I'm looking forward to that. And that'll drop later. You can watch it on YouTube or listen to it as a podcast wherever you wish. And the three of us will be back in 23 hours for another episode of this program. Grateful to you all for being part of the two-way community. Judy, nice to see that photo and be reminded of that great dinner. And grateful to you all for being part of two-way. Have a good day, everybody.